China says it is expelling Canada's consul in Shanghai. Beijing's decision, it comes after Ottawa said that it was sending home a diplomat accused of trying to intimidate a lawmaker critical of China. Beijing labelled diplomat Jennifer Lin a persona non grata and asked the Canadian diplomat to leave by 13th of May. The Foreign Ministry added that China reserves the right to react further. Earlier, Canada said the Toronto-based Chinese diplomat Zhao Wei would have to leave the country. Foreign Minister Melanie Joly said, and I'm quoting here, "We remain firm in our resolve that defending our democracy is of utmost importance." The expulsions plunged the two nations into a fresh diplomatic row after years of souring relations. They follow an outcry led by the Canadian lawmaker over allegations that China's intelligence agency planned to target him and his relatives in Hong Kong with sanctions. In 2021, Michael Chong, a member of the Canadian Parliament, voted for a motion condemning Beijing's conduct in Xinjiang region as genocide. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has faced growing pressure to take a hard line with Beijing. Recent revelations suggest that China sought to sway Canada's 2019 and 2021 elections as well. Ties have been tense since Canada's 2018 arrest of a top Huawei executive and the detention of two Canadian nationals in China in apparent retaliation. All three have been released, but Beijing has continued to blast Ottawa for aligning with Washington's China policy. On the other hand, Canadian officials have regularly accused China of interference. For more on this, we're now being joined by Jean-Pierre Cabaston from Hong Kong. He is an emeritus professor of political science, Department of Government and International Studies at the Hong Kong Baptist University. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast.
My pleasure.
Now, to begin with, how do you assess this latest diplomatic row between Canada and China?
Well, I think it's a reflection of the difficult relationship a number of democratic countries are having with China, in particular countries with large Chinese communities, which the Beijing authorities are trying to influence in one way or another. I'm thinking of Canada, but also I'm thinking of Australia. And these countries tend to be privileged targets of Chinese interference and meddling into elections. And that's new, but in a sense. But at the same time, it's been identified in a number of countries in the last few years. So it's becoming really an issue for quite a number of places.
Right, sir. That being said, as I mentioned earlier, of course, we've seen relations between the two souring for years now. That being said, how do you see the situation unfolding going forward?
Well, Canada and China have multiple relations, economic and trade relations, people-to-people relations. So, of course, I think the Canadians are hoping that things will move forward, but they are, as you mentioned earlier, there's been a number of problems in the last few years, not only the arrest, the detention for 2 years of the two Michaels, linked to the Huawei, the prosecution of the daughter of Huawei's company boss, but also, the cases of repeated meddling in Canadian elections. So it's becoming really a difficult relationship. Now, there is a domestic dimension in Canada because the Conservative Party is accusing the Trudeau government of being too soft towards China and having tolerated those interferences in Canadian domestic affairs for too long without reacting and without taking the necessary measures. So, of course, now as a tit-for-tat reaction, China decided to expel a Canadian consul general in Shanghai. I think it will stop here as far as this story and this crisis is concerned. But I think we have to be ready to witness other problems and maybe other diplomatic crises down the road between China and Canada, because China is becoming more and more assertive in trying to reach out, other countries and silence other countries' criticism of its own infringement of human rights, be it in Xinjiang, in Hong Kong, and elsewhere. So clearly, China has a kind of an extended interpretation of sovereignty and its sovereign interests.
Right. Professor, thank you so much for joining us with your insights on this.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.